We mourn those who were killed in this horrific massacre. Heidi Stevenson, Greg and Jamie Blair, Lisa McCulley, Heather O'Brien, Alana Jenkins and Sean McLeod, Jolene Oliver, Emily Tuck and Aaron Fryer Tuck, Frank Gulchin and Dawn Madsen, Gina Goulette, Lillian Hislop, Tom Bagley, Kristen Beaton, who was pregnant, John Zal and Elizabeth Joanne Thomas, Corey Ellison, Joey Weber, and Joy and Peter Bond. We have compiled 22 reasons why a public inquiry is necessary. While I read these out, please take out your phones and email Premier Stephen McNeil, so that's premier@novascotia.ca. Please take out your phones. And or Prime Minister Trudeau, that's justin.trudeau@parl.gc.ca, to demand an inquiry. We have printed out letters for you to sign. So back, Claire, can you raise your hand? Back in that corner, we have printed letters for you to sign and mail them yourselves. Postage is free to public officials. All right, these are the reasons. And after I read these out, I will call several speakers from our community who can speak to this tragedy and why we are calling for an inquiry. Number one, because 22 people, including a pregnant woman, were murdered in less than 24 hours, and each of these murders was preventable. Because a woman or girl is killed in this country every 2.5 days. Because most murdered women and girls are killed by men known to them. Because kids deserve to grow up safe from misogyny and gun violence. Our first speaker today is Emily Stewart, who is the Executive Director of Third Place Transition House, which serves Truro, Colchester, and East House Camp.
Thank you. On the night of April 18th, a brutal domestic assault occurred. 13 hours later, the perpetrator is shot and killed after 22 families lost loved ones in a massacre 3 counties wide. The horror of this night may seem unfathomable, but Nova Scotians are strong. We will weather the storm in the pursuit of truth and justice. I wouldn't be here today if I didn't believe that it is the right thing to do. Those most deeply affected by the gunman's violence have made their message unwaveringly clear during a time of unspeakable grief. It is known that a pattern of violence is a common denominator amongst mass shooters. The very next day in my heart, this to be true. We know now that he was a violent man with a deranged sense of entitlement, familiar enough with RCMP procedures to evade capture by blending in as one of their own. There were too many red flags: sustained intimate partner violence, coercive control tactics, death threats, and the possession of illegal firearms. These are all indicators used to measure the risk of lethality, each reported to the police over the years. The families have made their grief public with the earnest intent of needing to know what happened, with the belief that the powers that be would make sure this never happened again. By dismissing their rightful requests for a full public inquiry, you have shown not only a lack of compassion, but a failure to understand the basic principles of restorative approaches and trauma-informed care cited as central to the review process. These are just a few of the reasons why we call on the provincial government and the federal government demanding a full inquiry now. Thank you.
All forms of discrimination and violence against women by adopting the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Why then does feminicide and other violence against women continue to go unpunished today? According to anthropologist Rita Segato, who has investigated feminicides in Latin America, acts of violence comply with the existing social codes. Opposed to the general accepted social representation of rapists, in this case mass murderers, as being antisocial, and of feminicide as crime of passion. These acts seek to reaffirm the patriarchal system that we live in. I reflect on Segato's work because she has provided a number of conclusions that I think are relevant to our request for a public inquiry into the mass shooting. According to Segato, the fact that feminicide and other violence against women often go unpunished is proof of a judicial system that is intentionally blind to the systemic nature of gender-based violence. Naming these entities denounces a system that refuses to take a feminist and intersectional analysis to interrogate misogynistic-based behaviors and violence against women, and interrogate white privilege in policing, the RCMP, and beyond. Just imagine if a black man had even imagined to create a police car, what would have looked like? Taking on a feminist and intersectional analysis in an independent public inquiry will be consistent with the present federal government's adoption of feminist values. Its recognition that women's rights are human rights. Its call to passionately defend the rights of women and girls, and its commitment to eliminate racism and discrimination.
Thank you, Maria Jose. And now I call Jackie Stevens, who's the Executive Director of Avalon, the Sexual Assault Center here in the city. Woo. Hello, everyone. Today is an important act of solidarity and community mobilization. And healing and justice starts with us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up and having your voices heard. Historical and recent examples of mass murder and genocide in Canada have been rooted in misogyny and racism. To continue to deny and ignore this is to continue to perpetuate it and condone it. Violence causes trauma. So does not believing, blaming, denying, and ignoring the lived experience and knowledge of victims and survivors of violence. This has been voiced by the families of those murdered, victims and survivors of intimate partner, institutional, and systemic violence, by feminists, anti-violence and legal advocates, senators, politicians, legal and law enforcement professionals, and communities who have called for a public inquiry. A public inquiry that includes members from frontline feminist, anti-violence, community and survivor-based experience and knowledge. We need accountability and to expose and address the societal and systemic failure that enabled an abuser and a mass murderer. The review announced by the federal and provincial governments lacks the crucial transparency the situation demands, and that survivors of violence and their loved ones deserve. It risks re-traumatizing and causing further harm. At this moment in history, we cannot accept anything less than the acknowledgement of the patriarchal roots of violence and a total commitment to dismantling these systems of oppression by bringing a feminist lens to a full public inquiry.
Thank you, everyone. Violence is prevalent in the lives of the people we meet at Adson for Women and Children. We hear daily from women, trans, and non-binary people about violence they have experienced. Violence that often takes place in the home by a parent, a partner, a family friend. We see that people are often immune to the violence. It's been normalized. When others witness or hear about it, they are afraid to intervene or don't know how. Women who disclose are not always believed, or they are connected to resources that are insufficient isolated, not connected at all. We, like you, are very concerned that it appears that for years, red flags, whispers, even outright complaints to police about the perpetrator's domestic violence and accumulations of guns went unheeded. Sadly, these events have provided another opportunity to examine what was missed, to learn specifically about violence and hatred of women and the links to mass killings in the hopes of preventing future tragedies. We believe that this is an exercise that all Canadians need to share and be part of, not left to 3 hand-picked panelists to conduct in private. It is shocking. It is paternalistic of government to decide what information the families can handle. They want the truth. We all want the truth. It's too late to protect those families and our province from the realities of that terrible weekend. It's not too late to make sure it never happens again.
And now I call on Claudia Chender, who is the MLA for Dartmouth South. There you are, Claudia. And the Nova Scotia New Democratic Party's House Leader.
Good afternoon. On April 19th, Nova Scotians woke up to tragedy. The full magnitude took days to come into relief, but a few facts shone through crystalline in the grief. First, we lost 22 lives in an act of barbaric violence. Second, for some, this was not a surprise. The murderer was known to have been cruel and abusive, and he had been that night. In the days and weeks to come, we would find out that there were many red flags, including numerous credible reports to the RCMP through the years. And third, families and neighbors of the victims, first responders, police officers encountered scenes that will no doubt be imprinted on them for a lifetime, and from which it will take a lifetime to heal. We are here in solidarity with the families of the victims, with organizations serving women, with Canadian senators, and with all of you, because we believe that now is the time for that healing to begin. That healing begins with love. We have seen an outpouring of love from all corners of the province and the country in the past few months, but that healing is buoyed and maintained by justice. And justice means fixing what is broken in the systems that did not and could not prevent this tragedy. A system that does not take warnings of domestic violence seriously. A system that does not provide women, especially rural women, with the services they need to stem the tide of gender-based violence and misogyny. A system that doesn't take impersonating an officer seriously, nor the stockpiling of illegal firearms and cash. And finally, a system that could not act quickly enough to properly alert people and save lives once this began. There are no simple answers to the questions we have, but there are complex, complicated answers. And the people implicated in these questions are not likely to be forthcoming, and not because they are bad people, but more likely because they are good people, because they are caring people, and because they are now grappling with the horror of a million missteps and mistakes. We need to publicly, collectively chart the path of these mistakes with diligence, with precision, and with unwavering introduce a bill mandating a public inquiry so that we can debate this in public in the light of day. As the Premier said, we need to wait until we have a process where we have subpoena power and the full cooperation of the federal government. We are all here today to tell the Premier and Minister Furey that we are still waiting and that justice does not have a timeline. Thank you.
It's all okay. By the time we ask, it's just too late. By the time we act, it's just too late. Under cover of night, he makes his plan. On the outside, he's so bland. Red flags raised, but no one understands, so month by month, the flames are fanned. Click, click, the gun loads in his hand. And there's gasoline in cans, but we don't ask till he's began. We never act till he's began. And there's innocents asleep, or just walking on the street. Doors they never keep locked. Flames they went to leap towards. Alerts that didn't beep. Reports they buried deep. We can hardly even weep. The best of us can no longer speak to get the answers families seek, but the government response is just so weak, they cover up and turn their cheek. And there were candles burning the next night, and a red sunset in the sky, and not an eye across the province dry, but now when families ask why, shh, they just won't say. Shh, they turn away. And families shouldn't have to march, but those in charge don't have a heart. And there are promises withdrawn, and there's been lies told all along. And no, you cannot right a wrong while using families as pawns, while hoping problems will be gone, while leaving suffering prolonged, while the pain goes on and on. They've been failed at every turn. They say, I guess, you never know. We'll cover up and let it go. But we won't let families fight alone. In the dark was how he drove. And that's how his seeds were sown, under covers, to and fro, and they want to bury it unknown with the truth just never shown, but we are standing in the light. No more cover-ups and staying quiet. No more inconsistencies and lies, we say to publicly inquire. And we'll add our voice to make it loud until we shake the bricks of Province House. We'll stand our ground as one for justice. We're Nova Scotia strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Al.